In this session we're going to talk about selection methods as applied in the labour market. Organisations use a wide range of methods in selecting the right candidate to work for their organisations. They may place an advertisement in the local press or in the national press, and they may use recruitment agencies. So a wide range of approaches can be taken, and having selected some applicants, a shortlist is drawn up, and from the shortlist an even shorter list is drawn up for candidates who are suitable for interview, and then the selection process commences, which may involve assessment centres and may involve psychological testing. The most important, or the most popular perhaps, methods used by organisations include interviews, which is what we're going to deal with here, tests, different types of tests that could be given to applicants to try to work out their suitability for the job requirements as advertised. These tests will normally be drawn up by experts in the area. But it could also be assessment centres. Our assessment centre and references are dealt with in a separate video, so I'm not going to deal with those here. Instead, we're going to just focus in on the first two, the interviews and the tests. So let's look at the interview. Well, these are the most common form of selection. By and far the most popular method of selection. Interviews provide an opportunity for the candidate and the interviewer to meet face to face, as this allows better communication. So a face-to-face meeting between the person applying for the position and the person offering the position, so that they're able to assess each other. It's not just the organisation picking the right candidate, it's the candidate picking the organisation as well. The candidate, the applicant, may not want to work for certain organisations. When they find out what the work culture is, they may not be happy with that and may not want to work there. So it's a two-way street. The organisation wants to find out about the candidate, and the candidate wants to find out about the organisation. And one of the best ways of doing this is by putting the two together face to face so that they can appraise each other. The candidate and the interviewer gets the chance to exchange information regarding the job position and assess whether the job is suitable for the candidate. That's the point that's relevant here. It is a two-way street. Both are assessing each other. It's important that the right candidate is selected clearly, because that means there will be greater corporate efficiency. The business will prosper because the right person's in place, person with the right skills, the right attitude, the right competencies, the right background, and so on. And also the person who's recruited is interested in the organisation, is a good team member, applies him or herself to the task, is innovative, full of suggestions, and enjoys the working environment. So it's important that both assess each other to see how well their expectations of each other are fulfilled. Now, as I said, the interview benefits both parties. For example, for the candidate gets a better understanding of the job requirements and the organisation. So the job applicant is briefed about the organisation. Generally on the day of the interview, well, it's common practice on the day of the interview that they will be shown around the business and will be briefed about the business, and the candidate may ask questions and get answers to lingering questions about the business. It's important that honesty prevails, because it's clearly the case that the right person should be recruited. And if the answers are not that honest, it will show up when the person arrives and starts to do the job. So normally there is some sort of session of induction, minor induction to the organisation, the products it makes, the segment of the market it occupies, the culture of the business, and so on. As to whether that briefing period occurs before the interview or after varies. Generally speaking, it's probably a good idea to have it after the interview, so that during the interview the panel who are doing the interviewing have an opportunity to see what sort of research the candidate has done into the product, into the market, into the organisation, which shows a determination to get the position, and it shows a willingness to research and dig out information in advance. But as I said, it depends. It may be that the briefing session is before the interview, in which case, of course, the candidate will have been briefed in advance of the interview by the organisation. It's an opportunity, the interview, to ask questions and clear any doubts about the job. So the candidate can ask about the job description and what it involves, and clarify any issues. And the organisation, for its part, can try to assess whether the candidate is the best from amongst the group selected. The one that's most efficient will apply him or herself most diligently to work and is the best choice overall. The candidate will get to meet members of the organisation, and that's important. It's important that the candidate should get a feeling for what the members of the management are like, and what the spirit within the organisation is. It's important that they have a feel for the organisation, and it'll help to influence whether they want the position or not. So it's a means by which the candidate can assess the suitability of the organisation, and the organisation can assess the suitability of the candidate. Now, I said it benefits both parties. In terms of the organisation can discuss the job requirements in more detail. The organisation can explain exactly what is required from the particular vacancy that's been advertised. There's an opportunity to portray a positive image to the candidates. So the company can portray itself in a very positive manner to the candidates and explain what it's attempting to do. The organisation also gets the chance to observe the candidate and assess his or her potential to perform the duties. So the organisation benefits from having the person there face to face, answering the questions, and they can get a feeling about the person, whether the person will be a good team player in their organisation, whether the person will make a good contribution, and whether the person is generally motivated to work in the environment in which they're offering. Now, traditional interviews, well, these are also referred to as unstructured interviews. So a traditional interview is an unstructured interview. It's one in which there is very little preparation in many respects. The candidate and the person offering the job meet, and there is a discussion about the job, and they try to assess each other at that meeting. So it's a very straightforward process. These interviews are mainly unplanned, and they're not controlled in the sense that they're not formalized. They're not set out in specific rooms at specific times. They may be quite unplanned. There's bilateral communication. The two sides do talk. And the interview questions are not set out precisely in advance. The interview questions tend to develop out of the course of the chat, out of the course of the meeting. Both the candidate and the employer, in this case, if you like, they chat about the job, they talk about the job, and the employer describes what is required, and the person applying talks about what they can do and what they can't do, and out of this there is some meeting of mind, and the decision will be based on that. The unstructured interviews, well, the benefits are that they are very flexible. They're not formally set up, and there's not a lot of procedures in this. Mostly these jobs go to manual workers. Mostly these jobs go to people in the organization who have more routinized or more regulated activities within the organization. There is a chance to have good communications between the interviewer and the interviewee. Both of them can talk openly, and there's no real structure to the procedure, so it's quite informal almost. They have a meeting, and an outcome will emerge from the meeting. And there's no real structure or guidance as to how to conduct that. As I said, it's mainly aimed at occupations which are manual and unskilled, mainly at those occupations. Anderson and Shackleton state the limitations of unstructured interviews. There's can be a self-fulfilling prophecy about these. The person looking for to fill the vacancy may have someone in mind, or have some type of person in mind. And when the person arrives, when different people arrive to be interviewed, he or she has already decided which one to select. So the interview itself is almost irrelevant. The person has someone in mind. He has some type of person in mind, and when he sees the candidates, he or she knows which one to select. It's almost predetermined. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's done on the spot. It could be stereotyping. It could be there's a danger of stereotyping, that when the interviewer looks at the candidates, may see someone wearing a nice suit and think that's the person who can best do the job because they're wearing a nice suit. Stereotype, the stereotypical office worker. Or it may be that he looks at the person and decides this person looks like an engineer, looks like someone who is used to hard work. So it's stereotyping. Stereotyping is dangerous, and it's very illogical. It doesn't make any sense. But it can happen, and I think we have to be aware of it. I'll give you an example, just for the fun of it. Just look at this. What's the nationality of this person? Now, if I show you a picture of a person, what is the nationality of the person? Well, there's a person. What's the nationality of that person? Well, you may have guessed the person was English, or German, or maybe French. Well, I think a lot of people would say that person is French. Why would they say the person is French? Oh, because of the beret, because of the snail, because of the clothing, because of, I don't know. It's just stereotyping, which is wrong, because this person could be German, or this person could be American, or Scottish, or Swedish, or Russian, or it could be anywhere. But we have simply it's stereotyping. So likewise, when people attend for an interview, they may be judged in terms of stereotypes that the people doing the interviewing hold in their mind, which is wrong, because a person dresses in a certain way doesn't mean that he or she can perform certain functions or have got skills in a certain direction. Or if they dress in a certain way, it doesn't mean that they don't have skills in a certain direction. So it's wrong, but it can happen. There's also something called the halo and horns effect, which is well established in psychology. And it involves prejudging a candidate based on current or past characteristics. If imagine in a situation where it's let's say a small town, and there's somebody in the town who is has been very good in helping neighbours and in building the community, and is involved in helping the school and helping in sports clubs, and this person is very involved in the community, and suddenly is found to be guilty of stealing from a shop. The halo effect will kick in. The chances are that person will not be judged as badly as anybody else, because people will take into account all the good work that went before it. So the bad deed, the theft from a shop, is reduced. It's not as important. If someone else had stolen the same item from the shop, they would be judged more harshly. That's the halo effect, because this person is seen as essentially good, but slipped once. Whereas someone who hasn't had the halo effect, if they were to steal from the shop, they would have the full brunt of the law. And also the horns effect. If someone is seen as very bad, always in trouble, always causing problems, not a very sociable person, and it's difficult for those people to do right, to be seen to be doing a good thing. If to do a good thing, people are suspicious, because the majority of acts that these people commit are seen as unsociable. So it's the horns effect. People are tainted by lots of experiences over a period of time. It applies in all sorts of ways. If a candidate turns up for a job very well dressed and very well groomed, then if a second candidate turns up for the same job who's not as well dressed, not as well groomed, there is a prejudice towards the one who has made the bigger effort. Perhaps they have to do less to get the job. So we've got to watch out for the horns and halo effect. We have the contrast effect as well, where we tend to look at individuals applying for jobs and contrast them against people from the past or from people who currently do similar work. But that's unfair, because the people who are now applying for the job could be better. They're just not tested. They're not being given the opportunity. So there's an issue with that one. There's also the idea that some person who turns up for interview, somebody interviewing may think this person is very similar to me. very similar in attitude, very similar in his or her approach to problem solving, or his or her approach to work, or to life. And that creates a prejudice. So they will think, we want this person. But the other person, or the other people who have turned up for the same vacancy, they may be better at doing the particular job. But if the interviewer judges the person is similar to me, similar to him or her, then there may be a prejudice towards the person in that direction. There's also sometimes people take a liking to other people because they like their personality. They think they have a sense of humor, or they like the way they present themselves. Their body language is friendly. They're nice people. So they take a personal liking, which may be all wrong, because perhaps the other people who've turned up for interview are more efficient at doing the job, are better at doing the job, have better skills, and apply themselves better. So personal liking needs to be watched out for. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be eliminated if possible. The task is to get the right person into the job, not to get someone who's going to be affable and friendly and can't do the job. Structured interviews. The structured interview approach has helped improve the way interviews are conducted. So this attempts to get around these issues that we've selected. Stereotyping and the halo and horns effect and contrast effect and so on. So this is a way of attempting to get around it, having a more structured approach. The approach helps interviewers' ability in predicting the performance within the job role. So it helps the interviewers to try and get a better fix on the candidates in terms of their ability to perform the tasks that are specified in the job specification. And it attempts to do this in a more structured way, in a more logical way. The process for a structured interview includes asking all candidates the same questions and marking their response against a rating system. So trying to get commonality. If, let's say, 4 people were shortlisted for interview, ask the 4 of them the same questions and get their responses, and try to judge what is a good response and rate the individual responses to see which one comes nearest. Making sure that the questions that are asked are relevant to the job and the candidate's abilities. It's important that the candidate's abilities are taken into account. It's unfair to ask questions of people who have no experience in the area or no background in an area. It's intimidating, and there's no need for it. They will not be asked to do this in practice. So it's a question of being relevant to the job. The people who have turned up for the interview have read the job specification. That's what they're applying for. And the questions asked should be related to that. The downside of the approach is that the interviewer does not have much of an opportunity to probe the candidate. The questions tend to be set, same questions for all the candidates, so probing, which involves going off on a tangent, off on some issue that the candidate mentioned in their responses, that's limited, and the opportunity for it is limited. And that is a weakness of the approach. So sometimes structured interviews, may go about asking the same questions for everyone and give a little latitude, a little opportunity to ask a couple of probing questions if required of each of the candidates. But the main response, the first response, is the one in which comparability will be measured. Now, psychological testing, this can be applied for selection purposes. So it can be applied for selection purposes. It's often used, often within assessment centres. Time will be given over to psychological testing. This is the form of testing which tries to gauge whether people's personalities, their competencies, their skills are suitable to particular jobs. The tests are developed through evidence. They look at past outcomes, so they're based on evidence from the past, and they can look at experience and statistical data. Candidate scores are compared to the scores of the normal population and similar intellect groups. So these tests are applied to a wide range of people with certain characteristics, and then given to candidates for a particular job to see how their score measures against the norm, against the average for a wider selection of the population. So it may be that the results indicate that a person's numeracy skills are higher than average, or a person's literary skills are higher than average. So it returns some information about the candidate. Using online testing has become increasingly popular in recruiting graduates. The downside of using online testing is making sure that the candidate is the person who takes the test, not his or her friend who has got some qualification in the area. So there is an issue about cheating when taking online tests, and safeguards have to be built in to ensure it doesn't happen. The test should really be developed and administered by specialist psychologists. It's best that specialists do this. This is not something for the layperson, because the layperson A doesn't have the skills, and B may exhibit some prejudice towards the candidate, or not interpret the results fairly or accurately. So it's best it's done by specialists in the area. Now, the types of test. Well, there are various types of tests an organisation can consider when applying for when applying to the selection process. There could be an aptitude test, for example, intelligence tests, trainability tests, attainment tests, and personality tests. Now we'll just run through these very quickly just to give an idea of what they are, just to conclude this class. We'll start with the aptitude tests. This test assesses whether the candidate has the potential to develop their skills and abilities. Have they got the aptitude to do the job? If they haven't got the skills at the moment, can they be easily developed? Can they learn by doing the job? Can they learn efficiently? Can they learn fast? Can they get up to speed fast? Can they perform the functions that are required fast? Intelligence tests, mental ability. The test illustrates a candidate's mental capacity. It could be testing numeracy skills or literary skills or logic skills. Given certain scenarios, what's the logical thing to do? To see if they can problem solve, if they can think laterally, if they've got good mental skills that can be used in the business. So it mainly includes vocabulary, analogies, arithmetic, numbers, general knowledge questions. So there's a variety of ways in which intelligence tests are applied. The results of the test will determine the candidate's ability to take in new information. So it's important that employees have the capacity to grow with the job. As the technology in the business changes, the personnel within the business have to keep up to date and have to adjust to working conditions and have to learn new skills. And the intelligence test helps select suitable people right from the start. Trainability. Well, the test measures an employee's ability to be trained, as the term would suggest. The process consists of employees carrying out a practical test. If the employees can, or the applicants perhaps, instead of saying employees, if the applicants can undertake a test after training, then they have the ability to develop their performance. So trainability is looking at whether a person can be trained and whether they can be trained quickly and easily and efficiently, or is it going to be a costly exercise? And how willing is the person to be trained? Are they committed to the job? Do they want the opportunity to acquire the new skills and apply themselves to the task of the business? So, are they trainable? The attainment test. These tests measure the level of acquired skills. What skills has the applicant currently got? So, in the interview situation, it's important to know what skills the person has currently achieved. It's necessary to know what skills are required. The job application and the job specification process, all of the process in designing the job specification and going through the process of recruitment will refine the thinking of the organisation as to what skills ideally the candidate should have. And then trying to check off to see if candidates have got these skills. It may be generic skills, computing skills for example. The candidate should be capable of word processing and using a spreadsheet and using a presentation package and so on, using a database. Or it may be very specialist skills. The ability to write Java code, or the ability to complete certain accounts in the accountancy section, or undertake market research and understand the importance of bias and selection in deriving a sample. So it's a question of looking at what skills are required for the job and what skills the candidates currently have, because the mismatch between the two, if there is any, needs to be trained, needs to be filled if that person is selected. The personality test, a test conducted to assess personality and likely success in the job and the organisation. Some people may be very quiet, or others may be very sociable. Some are introvert and some are extrovert. Some people want to work in a team. Some people want to be quiet and just perform their task. So what's required in the job? What are the requirements of the job? What's the requirement of the section in which the person will be working? Is the person willing to engage in business presentations and have they got good communication skills? It's important to have some fix on the personality of the person, their likes and their dislikes, so that the management know what the person can do or would like to do and what they can't do. It's a search, I suppose, for the ideal employee, the one that matches the culture of the business most closely. Mostly these tests are used in the graduate and management jobs. They are not so much used for unskilled work and junior management, but for middle management and higher, these are widely used, and also for graduates. So graduates often have to take on psychological testing. It is a type of a form of stereotyping, which, as I said in the unstructured interview case, it's wrong. But it's stereotyping in the sense that it's trying to fit people into boxes. It looks at their personality types and associates them with certain personality types. If the person is quiet and is interested in computing and in computation and so on, the person may be seen as somebody who is very solitary and wants to work alone and wants to work with computers and is not really interested in people or is not very sociable. It's stereotyping. It may not be the case. It may be the case the person wants to work with computers and wants to work with data and wants to problem solve in that way, but also wants to be very sociable, wants to play football at the weekend and mix with colleagues after work. And so the idea of stereotyping is quite dangerous. General conclusion. The selection process is an important aspect of recruitment. Clearly it's important because it's important to get the right person into the job that's been advertised. It's a costly and time-consuming process. If conducted effectively, employers will be able to select the right candidate for the job, but it is costly and it is time-consuming. It involves placing an advertisement in the press or getting an employment agency to recommend candidates, shortlisting the candidates, so the human resource section have to shortlist the names, have to shortlist them again down to interview. An interviewing panel will be required. The questions have to be designed, a selection procedure put in place. It's time-consuming. But if the right person is selected, then it could be all worthwhile. There are various methods organizations can adopt in order to recruit candidates. It's an organization's responsibility to ensure they adopt the right method to suit the organization and the job description. If they choose the wrong method, they may end up with the wrong person, which means going through the whole activity again and also upsetting the person they have recruited, because that person may not fill the job expectations that the organization had. So the person may have to be moved laterally or moved to a different type of task within the organization, or even asked to leave the organization. So that's very upsetting. So it's important that the organization gets it right the first time, if possible. So even though it's costly and time consuming, it's time worth spending. Clearly all of this relates, as I said earlier, to areas like the graduate market or to middle management or upper management. For lower management and for manual work, the unstructured interview is normally what is used. But for higher up jobs, this is the route that's normally taken. That's all I'm going to deal with in this session, so I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.